Something my friends at work make fun of me for is my love for Irish folk music. I've been known to blast bagpipe music in the parking lot. So believe me when I say I was very excited when researching this video to find a possible story behind one of my favorite songs, John Kanaka. And if you've never heard of it, here's a snippet.
John Kanaka-naka, Toraye, Toraye, oh, Toraye.
So a while back, I did a show about John Sutter, which you can go check out after this video. Sutter was almost like a king in California for a while, until the gold rush destroyed his empire. In his memoirs, he is quoted as saying, "I could not have settled this country without the aid of these Kanakas." What is a Kanaka? Well, they're essentially commoner Hawaiians given to outsiders as servants, typically for a payment of $10 a month, and within 2 or 3 years, they needed to be returned to Hawaii. So now that you know that, let me tell you a story. The year was 1838. A Swiss man on the run from debtor's prison from both Missouri and Switzerland arrived in the city of Honolulu on the big island of Hawaii. He never intended to go there. He desperately wanted to go to the free land of California, where he could build himself an empire, pay off his debts, and bring his family to the New World. He had traveled to the Pacific Northwest with a fur trading group and found himself stuck for the winter. He didn't want to stay there, so he boarded a ship to Hawaii to then get on another, which would head to this tiny fishing town of Yerba Buena, known today as San Francisco. But he arrived too late and had to winter in this warm tropical place. He was somewhat surprised by how many Americans and English there were. Propping himself up as a high-class man, which he was not, he was able to make friends and was invited to all kinds of dinners and parties, eventually being granted a visit to meet King Kamehameha III. On the island, he was told of this place in Russian Alaska called New Archangel, now known as Sitka, where the trading was profitable. So, using credit, Sutter bought all kinds of supplies and a ship to then sail to Sitka, then finally to California. Before he left, though, he was given 10 Kanakas by Governor Mateo of Oahu. 8 men and 2 women. Whether he knew that one of the Kanakas he was given was not actually a Kanaka is not known. One of the Kanakas was a young man named Loana Keala o Kaiana, who was actually part of a royal bloodline. Loana was not born when the great Hawaiian Unification took place by King Kamehameha. His grandpa was the chief of Maui, Kaiana, who turned on Kamehameha in the midst of the takeover. Now, back then, all the islands were separate, and they had separate customs and cultures. Kamehameha believed the islands should be united, even if it meant by force. Kaiana was one of the closest advisors of Kamehameha, but was ambitious. He had learned English, he visited China and Alaska, and soon he was shut out from a top-secret meeting, and he turned on the plan and joined the resistance. He began building his army in Maui to attack Hawaii, but ended up being attacked first. Kamehameha and his army were overpowering with muscle and also the advantage of English weapons, like the cannon and the musket. After Maui was conquered, the war moved on to Oahu, where Kaiana joined forces. His wife, though, remained with Kamehameha and fought against him and the resistance. Kaiana eventually was shot down, and almost immediately the battle stopped in silence as his wife ran to him and held him in her arms until he took his last breath. The battle raged on and up to a cliff where the Hawaiians pushed about 800 men over the cliff to their deaths. This battle was the deciding point in the war, and for the first time in history, there was now the Kingdom of Hawaii. Now, nobody really knows why Loana was given to Sutter as a Kanaka. Was he being exiled for being related to his defecting grandfather? Was he simply an ambitious adventurer? Whatever the reason is, it is interesting to note that Governor Mateo was Kaiana's nephew, who obviously became governor of Oahu. His good friend growing up was the king, Kamehameha II, who died fairly young. When he died, Mateo married the king's widow, and when she died, married his other widow, who gave birth to Kamehameha IV and Kamehameha V. Either way, Loana was included in the 10 Kanakas and went to Alaska, then California. From the bay, they traveled up the river to the confluence of the Sacramento and American rivers. Then the Kanakas went to work, building temporary grass huts for shelter. Soon, the men taught the natives farming and herding techniques, and the women taught the native girls how to sew and to wash. This is about the time Loana changed his name to John Kelly. John Sutter's empire grew incredibly, and the fort was known far and wide as a safe way station and trading post in the dangerous West. The Kanakas took more of a liking to the natives, which helped Sutter a ton as a white guy. He didn't have much trust, but the Kanakas looked and acted very similarly to them, and they worked together. Eventually, gold was discovered and Sutter's empire fell, and the Kanakas either ran to the mines or to the river. John Kelly didn't join the gold rush, but instead became a riverboatman. He probably didn't work on the Delta King or the Delta Queen, but some kind of riverboat like those. One day, up on deck, a man named John Bidwell, the founder of the city of Chico, was traveling on a boat, and a tree branch knocked him overboard. John Kelly dove down and saved him, creating a relationship that would outlive him. Eventually, in a village near Oroville, John Kelly met a gal who happened to be a royal from Hawaii, and they got married. At some point in the 1850s, California passed their own version of the Indian Removal Act that the federal government had done back in the 1830s, where Indians were relocated onto reservations, and it also kind of made slavery legal, as long as it was an Indian. Well, John Kelly and his family were mistaken for Indians and were driven to a reservation, though he protested, saying he was Hawaiian. Luckily, he was able to write to King Kamehameha and explained the situation. The king sent word and was able to get him returned to Camp Bidwell, where he had been living before. He eventually had 5 kids, one of whom would die young, and he slowly went blind, and by the time he was 50 years old, he killed his wife and committed suicide. Now, one of his kids was a young girl named Mele, whose American name was Mary. She was 17 years old when King David Kalakua came to California to visit. This was in 1881. There was some sort of event where a bunch of Hawaiians came to meet the king, and she went and told him of her lineage. They were related. He immediately appointed her guardian of the king's kahili. Then she was asked to come back to Hawaii, where she then served Queen Kapolani. She did that for 5 years, then came back to California. Eventually, in 1891, King David visited California once again, but this time he got sick and died. Mary was called to watch over the casket and make sure his body safely returned to Hawaii. She went back to California to live in a house that the Bidwell family built for her. Now, is John Kelly the John in the song John Kanaka? Probably not. But now you'll think of John Kelly whenever you hear that song. So, you're welcome. Before you move on and watch my other videos like that one about John Sutter, this video was brought to you by the Hawaiian State Book Series by Joseph Chamberlain. These books are easy to read and are in large fonts, so you might not even need your reading glasses. These books are similar to what I'm doing here in my show, teaching history by telling a really good story. The links to buy on Amazon are down in the description. Mahalo.